I'm going to do something quite different today. I'm not going to talk about a movie. Yeah, I'm having a day off. Instead, I'm going to play my claw machine. Hang on, Blues Brothers, what's that doing in there? Well, I've changed my mind. Clearly, I must talk about this classic movie. I just have to win it first. Come on, come on. Ooh, yeah, come on. Yeah! Ha! I got it. Yes, indeed, the Blues Brothers. John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd are Jake and Elwood, the Blues Brothers, two blues musicians who are on a mission from God and are bringing as much chaos and destruction with them along the way. Directed by John Landis and released in 1980, yep, a whole 40 years ago, The Blues Brothers tells the story of Jake and Elwood, who are putting the band back together so they can perform the ultimate blues concert in order to raise money to save an orphanage. Although their intentions are good, they still have many hilarious misadventures along the way, to the point where the police, SWAT, and army are after them. In this classic movie that has plenty of comedy, classic songs, and general non-stop enjoyability. Yeah, The Blues Brothers is a film you can't really say anything bad about, as it's one of those movies that's kind of perfect for what it is. However, the behind the scenes were anything but perfect. So let's explore this by looking into 10 things that you didn't know about the Blues Brothers. Number 10. Origins of the Blues Brothers. The Blues Brothers was already a thing before the movie came out, and was a pretty successful band for that matter, as John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd frequently appeared as the iconic brothers on the hit sketch comedy show Saturday Night Live. The Blues Brothers came from the mind of musician Howard Shore, who worked as a musical director on Saturday Night Live. Dan Aykroyd helped to create the backstory of Jake and Elwood, with the brothers growing up in an orphanage where they befriended a janitor called Curtis, who taught them how to play the blues. The Blues Brothers was such a successful act, an album was released in 1978 called Briefcase Full of Blues. Aykroyd decided that the Blues Brothers would make a great movie, and thus wrote his first movie script, which was a whopping 324 pages, which also took him 6 months to write. Yeah, as mentioned, it was his first movie script. This, however, took place after there was a bidding war between Paramount Pictures and Universal Pictures as to who would produce the Blues Brothers movie, with Universal Pictures winning the rights, and thus the Blues Brothers movie was greenlit. Number 9. The movie went way over budget. So with the forming of the Blues Brothers movie, John Landis was hired as the movie's director, on the account that he had already worked with Belushi a few years earlier when he directed the successful outrageous comedy caper Animal House, where Blues Brothers was to be filmed in and around the city of Chicago. Universal wanted to give the movie a budget of $12 million, but Aykroyd and Landis insisted that the budget should at least be $20 million, until finally $17 million was settled. However, during filming, the budget rose to $27 million. To be fair though, the movie's budget was pretty extravagant. For example, Belushi got paid way more than Dan Aykroyd, twice as much to be precise. And the scene where the army arrives to take down Jake and Elwood cost $3.2 million alone. Yeah, the Blues Brothers had a runaway budget, with all kinds of expenses being used, some of which were for the most bizarre of reasons, as we'll discover along the way. But hey, it was all worth it as the end product is a masterpiece. Number 8. The movie could have been less blues and more disco. When Universal obtained the rights to produce The Blues Brothers, the movie's budget and Dan Aykroyd's phone book heavy script weren't the only things the company had trepidation with, as they also had issues with probably the most important aspect of the movie, the music. The Blues Brothers features appearances and musical numbers from many renowned artists, such as James Brown, Ray Charles, and Aretha Franklin. However, Universal felt that some of the musical acts weren't modern or hip enough, and were pretty old school, and wanted more contemporary acts, such as Rose Royce, who at that time released the successful disco hit Car Wash. Thankfully, John Landis stuck to his guns with using the artists as seen in the movie. But let's face it, it's the soul music in the Blues Brothers that gives it its soul. Number 7. The movie was literally blessed. The Blues Brothers features guest appearance from not only musical artists, but also other famous faces, such as Steven Spielberg, Carrie Fisher, Twiggy, Frank Oz, Paul Rubens, and John Candy, to name but a few. However, another famous face made it to the set behind the scenes, that being the Pope himself, as John Paul II just so happened to be in town, no doubt cruising around in his Pope-mobile, when he stopped by the set and met the cast and crew and blessed the set. Which I guess kind of makes sense, given that the theme of the movie was about Jake and Elwood being on a mission from God. Either way, I kind of have the feeling that not many movie productions can actually say that their movie was actually blessed by the Pope. Seriously though, how funny would it have been had the Pope made an appearance in the actual movie? You know, you could have had the Bluesmobile drag racing the Pope-mobile, it could have been comedy gold! Number 6, there was almost a filming disaster. The start of the movie features the character Jake going through the process of leaving prison, along with some interesting aerial shots of the prison, which I suppose is meant to suggest God is looking down and thus orchestrating the turn of events, you know, to go with all the God and other supernatural themes in the movie. However, filming these scenes nearly led to total disaster, as probably due to some kind of communication error, prison guards nearly shot down the helicopter that was filming the aerial shots, with the prison employees believing that some kind of prison break was taking place. Thankfully, the filming was completed and the helicopter wasn't shot down, and thus no one died. I guess the moral of the story is, if you're going to let a film crew film in your jail facility, then tell the guards about it, I guess. Number 5, record for amount of cars destroyed. The Blues Brothers is many things. It's a musical, a comedy, a tale of brotherly love, and something it also is an action movie with plenty of intense, crazy stunts. The amount of cars that get torn up and destroyed in the Blues Brothers is insane. In fact, the Blues Brothers had a world record for most cars destroyed while making a movie, with a total of 104 cars being destroyed. A record that it held on to the sequel, The Blues Brothers 2000. Which was also then beaten by G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. But not only that, but the scene where we see Jake and Elwood crashing their cop car Bluesmobile through a shopping mall was filmed in an actual shopping mall, namely the Harvey Mall in Chicago. And many of the stores that we see the car crashing through were just makeshift stores that the crew put together. And just when the filming couldn't get any crazier, John Landis actually dropped a car at 1,200 feet in the streets of Chicago for that scene where the Nazis in their red car plummet to the ground. The car was dropped via helicopter. See what I mean when I said the movie's budget was extravagant? Number 4, Brussels sprouts and wedding proposals. In The Blues Brothers, movie legend Carrie Fisher plays the disgruntled ex-lover of Jake, who is trying to kill him in order to seek revenge on him bailing on their wedding. However, in real life, Carrie Fisher was actually in a relationship with the other Blues brother, Dan Aykroyd, who actually proposed to the young actress on the movie's set, but under the strangest of circumstances, as he proposed just after saving her from choking on a Brussels sprout. Because nothing says I love you more than making your loved one regurgitate a Brussels sprout. Ha! It's the oldest trick in the book. Well, if saving someone from the perils of a Brussels sprout can't give you a happily ever after, then nothing will. However, as history has shown us, Aykroyd's and Fisher's romance didn't last long. Number 3, John Belushi's struggles. It's hard to talk about the behind the scenes of the Blues Brothers without talking about the real life tragedy of John Belushi's life. It's no secret that at this time of his life, Belushi had many struggles with substances, but it seemed that this dangerous indulgence took its toll during the making of the Blues Brothers. Belushi's habits were so out of control while filming, director John Landis had to hire a security guard to make sure that Belushi didn't take any substances while they were filming. Which actually wasn't easy, as fans were periodically visiting the set and helping to fuel Belushi's habits. And on one occasion, supposedly Belushi was nowhere to be found when filming was to be taking place, when he was finally discovered in a random stranger's home, where he entered their property, raided their fridge, and passed out on their couch. Wow, imagine living in that house and waking up in the night to find John Belushi having a nap on your couch. Jokes aside though, it's actually really sad, as it was a sign of someone who clearly had no control of their life. Although it's easy to talk about Belushi's troubled behaviour, we should also mention the good that he did, as in the spirit of his Blues Brothers character Jake, Belushi donated $200,000 to an orphanage while making the Blues Brothers. Sadly though, 2 years later in 1982, John Belushi's lifestyle finally took its toll, and the actor sadly passed away, and the world lost a very charismatic and talented man. Number 2, everyone thought the movie would flop thanks to Steven Spielberg. As if the movie's budget wasn't a strain enough, there were also worries that the Blues Brothers was going to totally tank at the box office. And in part, it was thanks to Steven Spielberg, who the previous year directed the World War II themed comedy movie 1941, in which it flopped and didn't do well with critics, and the movie's main star was John Belushi, and thus because of 1941 it was feared that Belushi was no longer a marketable actor. And thus no one would watch the Blues Brothers, believing it to be another 1941. In fact, at one stage the Blues Brothers even got the nickname 1942. I think 1941 is a movie that people have come to appreciate in time, but back in the day it was known as Spielberg's big failure, and thus didn't do anything to further Belushi's career. Gladly, everyone who thought the movie was going to be a failure because of 1941 was swiftly proven wrong. The Blues Brothers 1942 nickname aside, in this Spanish translation of the movie, it went under the title of Scoundrels at Full Speed. And with this other Spanish translation, the Blues Brothers was called The Cheeky Brothers. Hey, I like it. And in France, the movie was called The Blues Brothers. Yeah, it was just The Blues Brothers. But damn, I love that poster. Look at Elwood, it's like he's pretending to be a chicken. Number 1, the blues that movie audiences embraced. There were still problems facing the Blues Brothers even with its release, as several movie theatres didn't book the Blues Brothers, believing it to be a movie that white people wouldn't go and see, which I find just insane. Like, seriously? Thankfully, those predictions didn't turn out to be true, as the movie was loved and embraced by many different races and cultures. But the problems didn't end there, as the original cut of the movie was 2.5 hours long, and due to the movie's length, Landis was ordered to go back and cut 25 minutes out of the movie. However, despite all this, The Blues Brothers was a massive hit, and one of the defining movies of the 80s, bringing in just over $115 million at the box office. It opened at the number 2 spot, beaten by The Empire Strikes Back, which is very impressive as at that stage Star Wars was a well-known powerhouse franchise. The Blues Brothers also became the 10th highest grossing movie of 1980, and has gone on to become a classic movie, and a movie that is both adored and celebrated, as it seems that even today, people just can't seem to get enough of Jake and Elwood. There may have been many dilemmas and setbacks while making the Blues Brothers, but thankfully Jake and Elwood could complete their mission from God and deliver one of the best films to come out of the 80s, along with being one of the greatest musicals ever and one of the greatest comedies ever. And it's all with good reason. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm on a mission from God to say see ya. See ya!